This is the Indirect Podcast. Steve Schlanger without Tim Ream, who this time of year, given what has just happened in his life professionally with Fulham, we have given him a little time off. A holiday, as they say in England. Tim with the Fulham squad that has just been promoted back to the Premier League for next year. He's off doing his own thing with the family, so we'll catch up with him at another time. In the meantime, still a lot of football going on as we wrap up the domestic season in Europe. And we are joined by Adam Shergold, who we've talked to before from the Daily Mail in London, as we are on the tail end of the domestic season, just wrapping up the Champions League from this past weekend, the final in Paris, and there are so many different storylines to get to with regard to this game. Let's begin, first of all, from a big picture perspective. Adam, what did you think of the game itself? What are your impressions of what happened between Liverpool and Real?
Yeah, hi Steve, good to be with you again. It was a curious one, wasn't it? It was Liverpool dominance was the story of the game, really. You know, the fact that Thibaut Courtois was man of the match, making all those saves to Real Madrid, showed how Liverpool were really able to open them up and create chances. He made some astonishing saves. And yet, when Vinicius scored, and we still had half an hour left, remember, you just sensed that Real were going to win. You just sensed there was no way back. And from what I've read in the amongst Liverpool fans actually in the stadium, there was that kind of flat feeling that there's just no way back from this, which was, weird considering how they do steamroll the teams. They do, they've always got a goal, they always create chances. And yet there was just that feeling that once they went behind, it wasn't going to be their night. And Real shut the game down brilliantly. Courtois still had some big saves to make, and he did that. There was still some defensive hanging on to do for Real just to thwart Liverpool at the end. But yeah, you could say they were worthy winners, I guess. They've been the comeback kings all the way through their Champions League run. This time they actually took the lead, which was rare for them. Usually they go behind first. But yeah, I just felt watching it that once Liverpool went behind, whether it was tired legs at the end of a 60-game season or what, they just looked drained and there was no way back for once for them. So yeah, congrats to Real. 14 European Cup and Champions League titles, twice as many as anyone else. More history made.
The game, to me, started off really slow and kind of plodding, and clearly Real Madrid were conceding possession to Liverpool. They were just going to let them have the ball. They were going to sit deep, and I was thinking to myself, well, if this is going to go on for 90 minutes, this is going to be a very dull Champions League final. But Real were just being patient, apparently, and waiting for some opportunities to develop. I thought that they defended exceptionally well in terms of making Liverpool operate in tight spaces, and when those half chances were to occur, you always had a Real defender getting a foot in, or in the case of Danny Carvajal, marking Diaz closely, just doing those little things where in games like this, you often have a player who just gets that little extra separation, creates that little extra space, and that makes the difference in a quality shot, getting the decisive goal, and Real was always there to deny that. And I thought that was really one of the keys, especially in the second half, to shutting Liverpool down, even though Liverpool had the majority of the possession. I was actually surprised by how well and how consistently Madrid defended throughout the 90 minutes.
Yeah, they were really well drilled. As you say, Liverpool are good in 2-on-1 situations, especially out wide. They often get the overlap of their wing-backs, to support, and then a defender is outnumbered. They could often get a crossing from that situation. You mentioned Diaz. He's just had this knack of coming up with crucial goals this season. He's been an excellent signing. They did a man-marking job, as you say. They completely took him out of the game. Carvajal, brilliant, tactics from Ancelotti to concentrate on him. And yeah, there was just no space to work in, as you say, at least, in and around the box when, you can get a shot off, you get a lucky deflection, you can, it can sneak in. It didn't matter whether it was Mane, Salah. They just didn't seem to have the room that maybe they've got used to in the Premier League games this season, when they've just become used to dictating all the tempo. They've had the possession. They've been excellent on the counter-attack as well. They can flick a switch and go from the back to scoring a goal in a matter of seconds with the pace in the team. Real just had obviously done their homework, and they shut all that down. I think you mentioned it as a slow start. You have to remember there was a 36-minute delay to kick off. The players had warmed up.
Right.
They then had to go back in for the best part of half an hour. Nobody knew what was going on. There was obviously chaos outside. UEFA pressed ahead with their opening ceremony, which took another 10 minutes. The players had been out for another warm-up. Then you've got an opening ceremony. They're getting cold again. The muscles are kind of getting cold. They then came out, and it's little wonder to me, especially at the end of a long season anyway, that it wasn't a thriller. It wasn't end-to-end. It was a slow pace, as you say. I think that was a big factor, actually. Had it started on time, we may have seen a better spectacle.
Yeah, all of the chaos and things that were happening outside, that's another story, which I'll get to in just a moment. But going back to the game to finish off there, when this game was first put together after the semifinal round and we knew who the two finalists were going to be, my first thought in terms of tactics and strategy was going to be, well, Vinicius Jr. with his pace on the outside against Trent Alexander-Arnold and his defensive issues that he sometimes suffers through. I thought that was going to be a key matchup, and I thought that Vinny Jr. could really take advantage of Trent Alexander-Arnold. And he wound up doing just that in a different way, just kind of sneaking in behind him for the only goal of the game. He wasn't terrorizing him there on the left with his pace the way I thought he might do, as Real tried on occasion to get him free down that left side, but Liverpool were smart. They offered support for Trent Alexander-Arnold, who was pushed high up the pitch on various occasions, so other defenders would come over and cover, so they were tactically smart in that way. But in the end, that's exactly what happened. Vinny Jr. snuck in when Trent Alexander-Arnold had a momentary lapse in concentration, and that turned out to be the difference.
Yeah, the final was settled, right, in the way that everyone expected the final to be settled. It was lots of people had identified that as Liverpool's main weakness. Alexander-Arnold is a superb player, is a superb wing-back, but he's a wing-back. He's not an orthodox right-back. He's not going to stay there. He will allow space in behind him. We've seen him exposed by long diagonal balls and crosses in the past, and obviously, Ancelotti probably would have been hammering home the message to Vinicius all week. Get a run on him, get in behind him, lurk there, just stay there. You don't have to track back. We'll catch him out. And as you say, the goal didn't come quite in the way we expected, but it was from that one-on-one situation. And as you rightly say, Real hadn't really exploited it until that point. They just couldn't get, Vinicius free on that left-hand side. As you say, a midfielder would often drop back and mark him, and he was kind of marked out of the game for the first hour. But, he's such a talented young player. He only needed one sniff of goal. He got in that moment, and that ultimately made the difference. As, at the highest level, just a lapse in concentration like that will make all the difference. And, as you say, he was the match winner. Quite a few people may have put money on to settle that game, but maybe not in the way that we expected.
Benzema didn't have his best game of the Champions League, didn't have to in the very end, but he's got to win the Ballon d'Or, right? Given what he's done throughout the Champions League season, given the rest of the candidates, he has got to win that award this year, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think he's the favourite now. The way he's put the English teams to the sword this season, and Paris Saint-Germain, of course. I remember seeing him in the first leg against Chelsea, scoring those headers from what seemed like impossible angles. Absolutely incredible how he gets into those positions, can generate the power on headers, let alone shots, to pick out the bottom corner, to be the world-class goalkeeper like that. Yeah, he didn't have a vintage final. Yeah, you wouldn't put him among any of the top performers on the night. Thankfully, Real have plenty of other match winners, as it proved. But yeah, my goodness, what an outstanding season he's had. The number of goals he's scored, both domestically, but crucially in the Champions League as well. He's a reliable scorer in Europe. He's played in the competition for so long. He knows what to do. He knows where to be. He knows the spaces you need to get into, and he can always execute. He always has the finish. He's been the tormentor of English teams all season. was obviously brilliant against PSG as well. He came alive in the knockout stages. He as the best players do, and if you do that, then yes, you deserve to be the best player in the world. I mean, let's look at the situation. Who would he be up against? You've got your classic Messi and Ronaldo. Yes, Ronaldo's scored a lot of goals for Man United this season, but unfortunately they're a little bit, past their best now. They're not really deserving of winning the Ballon d'Or anymore. Obviously Lewandowski's had a great season, but Bayern failed in Europe. Mbappe's had a great season, but PSG failed in Europe. And ultimately, it will come down to the Champions League. Another factor is obviously with the World Cup being so late in the year, it probably won't come into the thinking when people are voting. If it had been held in the summer and, say, France had won again and Mbappe had been amazing, it may have swung a few opinions. But I would say, given that it's usually handed out in like the first month of next year, people may not have the voting process may not take into account all of the World Cup, which could be a factor. So Benzema has got in early, won the Champions League and scored some crucial goals. And you have to say it's hard to look beyond him at the moment.
I don't know if there's been a player who has been so unloved or such an afterthought to be this good. When you think of, first of all, his age, but then think back over the years, what's happened. He's played alongside Ronaldo, who was always obviously the top striker on the team. And then all of the talk about trying to get Mbappe, trying to get another big young striker. And through all of this, even going back to Ronaldo in his heyday at Madrid, Benzema has been a consistent presence. He's always been there. He just hasn't always been the guy. And he's been the guy recently just by default because they haven't had anybody else. And when he's been given this platform, he has incredibly shined in a way that I don't even think the Madrid hierarchy may have expected. And even then, the pursuit of Mbappe was tenacious. But, here is Benzema at this, relatively late stage of his career, a guy who was out of the French national team for some 5 years as well. Mm-hmm. And yet he's emerging right now as the best player in the world. I don't know if there's ever been a comparison like this that I could make with any other player.
Yes, it could be a pretty good film script one day, couldn't it? It's definitely I wouldn't say he's an underrated player. I think he's, as you say, unloved is the word. Obviously, when Ronaldo was at Real, he was the main guy up front, as he's going to be. He was the best in the world at the time, arguably. They won all those Champions Leagues. Benzema was always the bridesmaid to him, really. He was sort of not given the credit that maybe he deserved, despite having consistent 20, 30 goal seasons for Real, because there were just still plenty of opportunities that were always going to come his way that he would just put away. As you say, his exile from the French team, there's always that whiff of scandal around all that, and he missed out on some tournaments. Do you think how strong that French team would have been? And then all the while, you've got there's always speculation about Real Madrid, isn't there? Who are they going to sign? Who's the best player in the world? Who's the next Galactico they're going to bring in? We've had this Mbappe stuff for like 2 years. Finally, he's not going there. But we've also had it with Erling Haaland. Any good player that comes through, they're going to be linked with, especially strikers. And it's kind of disrespectful to Benzema, isn't it? It's like, he's in the later stages of his career. But this has been going on for years. It's sort of like, well, give the guy a bit of respect. He's just, basically won you the Champions League. Finally, he may get the appreciation on a kind of, beyond Madrid, on a wider stage that he probably deserves. And especially if he goes to the World Cup as well. Now he's back in the France fold. Really quite disrespectful to be saying like, oh, we've got to get Mbappe, we've got to get such and such, we've got to spend 100 million when you've got the world's best striker already in your team.
And Madrid clearly has always been obsessed with trophies, not just the literal trophies like the Champions League, but players as trophies, like the hottest young players available on the market. And that's why they continue to go after the biggest names in world football. But sometimes a less is more approach can be better in terms of the competitive outlook of the team. And we've seen what happened with PSG when you try to bring this cosmos of all of these big individual stars together like Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe, and it's hard to get them to function as one. If you have just that one true star like a Benzema or like a Haaland, that is the focal point, then everybody knows how you're going to play. Everybody knows what the strategy is. And sometimes it's just a more direct path to success. But some teams just don't see it because, I don't know, is it just too simple? Is it just not too glamorous for a Real Madrid? Is that the case?
I think it's the grinding of egos against each other in a team and in a dressing room. It's not easy to marry all of these highly paid, egotistic players in some cases together in a cohesive team. There's lessons in history here, and Real and PSG should heed the fact that from the first, we all remember the first Real Madrid Galacticos, right? Turn the century, every summer they'd sign the best player in the world. So it was Figo, it was Zidane, Roberto Carlos, Beckham, all these guys. They won one Champions League. It was an experiment. It was an expensive failure. Yes, you may have won a couple of league titles, and they should have been dominating with that team, and they didn't even dominate in their own country. They won the 2002 Champions League when Zidane scored that stunning goal playing Bayer Leverkusen in the final, who no one expected to get to the final. And then they never got to another final, this Galacticos team. So surely there's a lesson in there somewhere that you can't just throw together 5 or 6 of the world's best players and expect them to function in a kind of effective team and all gel together immediately and win all the top prizes. Football doesn't work like that. As you mentioned, PSG, you look at that front line they've had this season, you think, wow, they should be sweeping everyone aside. They should be winning the Champions League, and got to the last 16 and got knocked out. You hear with the Mbappe deal, his new contract, part of it was that he was promised changes behind the scenes in the way the club runs, the focus they have, less on kind of being commercially driven, less on sort of revenues, more on actually getting a winning team together. And ultimately, that's what you should have as a football club. You shouldn't. It's great, bringing in all this money, but if you don't win anything, then what's the point, really? Some cautionary tales from.
Well, and that's really, I think, the key is that why not have that one player that you trust and say, okay, we're building around you. You are our focal point, and you are the one we are counting on. We're not going to try to have all of these individual stars that we're going to bring together, and hopefully the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, because typically the sum of the parts cause the whole to go sideways. Mm-hmm. So I know people, and especially teams with money, get obsessed and just get infatuated with the notion of, wow, if we could have all of these individual stars, how great this would be. And for merchandising, it probably is great. But competitively, it typically doesn't work out, and teams are finding this out. So I think, I don't know, if you just scale it back and say, all right, we've got Benzema. We're good with that. We can rely on him, and we can trust him. Sometimes that's the best path to go down.
Well, put it this way, I think after this weekend, Real have quickly forgotten about Mbappe. I think that's already been brushed into the past. So that's fine. They might be okay for another couple of years with Benzema. Someone else will come along that they'll want to sign at some stage. But yeah, let's.
What is it?
No, go for it.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you compare PSG. You've got Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe up front. These lavish stars on $500,000 a week or whatever, expensively assembled forward line, brilliant, glamorous, sell shirts in Asia, whatever. Then you compare it to Man City or Liverpool. Yes, I know they spend a lot of money, but they have managers who pick the best player. You look at them; they're a cohesive team. They work as a unit, and yes, it takes a few years to get to that stage. But Guardiola and Klopp, as you rightly say, it's a holistic thing. The whole team is more important than individuals, and they may be sort of slightly less lavish stars, but they function together well. They work together well. They know what they're doing. They're not individualistic. They won't take a shot when there's 2 teammates in space most of the time. Anyway, sometimes Salah does, but it's it works because it's a team, it's a collective, and the mentality you get from that means that you win matches in the last minute, deep into stoppage time, like Liverpool have done all season. And City did on the final day when they came back from 2 goals down to win the Premier League. It's like, Can you see PSG doing that? Not at all, really. You just see them sort of getting to the knockout stage of the Champions League and just blowing up. So yeah, there's a way of doing things. It's nice to have these trinket players, these trophy players, but ultimately you need a team, and teams win the Champions League.
A final thought on Real before we move on. Why is it that so many of the world's top individual players go there and seemingly disappear? And I know that injuries have been a big part of that story, but if you look back over history, and especially recent history, Gareth Bale, Eden Hazard, going back to Michael Owen, the best individual players in the world have gone to Real, and it just hasn't been that they've lost a step. They have just completely lost their careers. What's going on with that?
Yeah, I think at a club like that, you quickly become yesterday's news, if you like. So, Bale moved in 2013. He was a world record signing. He had 3 or 4 brilliant seasons. He won the Champions League, 4 times. You can't really say fairer than that. Once the injuries kicked in, though, it's quickly downhill. If you're out of the Real team, someone else will come in and take your place. And if they do well, you're not going to win that place back. And that's what Bale's found over the last couple of years, to name an example. Hazard as well. He's been crippled with injuries ever since he arrived. It's been a real shame. That's not his fault. But, ultimately, they've got such a strength in their squad that someone will come in and impress. And they're a team that wins 90% of the time anyway, and always going to, especially as a forward, there's always going to be someone creating, someone scoring goals, and the manager will just turn to them after a certain point. It's like, well, you've been out for so long, you've got to win your place back. It's incredibly difficult. I mean, we saw, Bale celebrating winning the Champions League. He played 7 minutes in the Champions League this season. They give out a certain number of medals. That's great. He gets another medal. He'll be saying he's won it for a 5th time, but he's really played no part in it, and he has been out injured for a lot of the time. But the fact is, you just fall out of favour very quickly. A side like that, they're always going to have talented players coming through the academy. They're always going to have a stockpile of the best talents from around the world who can come in and impress, like Vinicius has, for example, and a core of really good players in every position. 2 or 3 internationals, 2 or 3 world-class players in every position. So if you lose your place, it's a long way back sometimes. And, sometimes Bale's contract has now run out. He'll obviously probably leave this summer. I'm not entirely sure where he will go to. There's even talk that he may retire, which seems very premature at the age of 31. Hazard, hopefully he'll get a chance. They're paying him a lot of money to sit on the bench. So you have to hope he's been seriously unlucky that he will get a run of fitness, that he'll be able to play more regularly. But ultimately, if you're not there, you're not performing, someone will take your place.
Regarding Liverpool, within just the last few weeks, the conversation was still about the quadruple and pulling off something unprecedented. Now they've missed out on the 2 biggest aspects of that quadruple, the Premier League title and the Champions League crown. And when you look back holistically at Liverpool this season, the 2 cups that they did win, the Carabao Cup, which honestly not many people really care about, and then the FA Cup, you're talking about football going through regular time into extra time without scoring. They had to win on penalties, which everyone knows is a lottery. So they won those 2 on penalties. They lost the 2 most important trophies. So how do you characterize, how do you evaluate this Liverpool season?
Yeah, you can look at it. You look at it one or 2 ways, really. You can say, yeah, they won 2 domestic cups, and in terms of going for the quadruple, they got further than any other team has done before. I remember Man United had a good tilt at it under Ferguson about 12 years ago when they'd won the League Cup, I think, and they were still in the contention in the other 3 competitions. Man City did it more recently under Guardiola. They were still in contention, I think, for all 4 going into April. Liverpool have taken it far further than anyone else. They got the Carabao Cup, the League Cup, and the FA Cup in the bag, and just fell short at the final hurdle. The other way of looking at it, as you say, they were a kick or 2 away from losing both of those finals, which, to Chelsea, who held them for 120 minutes on both occasions and, more than matched them as a contest. So they could have ended up with nothing very, very easily, or they could have ended up with 4. I mean, how do you look at it? I mean, you can't say it's been a bad season to get so far, but also it must be hugely deflating this last week, and you do wonder if Jurgen Klopp has what it takes, and I wouldn't doubt him in this, but has he got what it takes to build another team, to build their confidence back up again, to lift them off the floor after Saturday night, with everything around that game, and the sort of, you look back at 2018 when they lost to Real Madrid in the Kiev final, and a year later they won the Champions League, and Klopp was trying to lift the spirits by saying to the fans, the finals in Istanbul next year, get your hotels booked, we'll be there, and you wouldn't put it past them. But also, are they destined to be, the biggest nearly men of modern times? I mean, it's not their fault they're up against a superb Man City side who have won 4 of the last 5 Premier League titles. It's not their fault they ran into a Real Madrid side who had a brilliant mentality and are so hard to beat and break down as they did the other night. But are they nearly men? The flip side is they've won 1 out of 5 Premier League titles in that same period. They've won 1 Champions League in that same period. So you look at great teams from the past, and there's plenty of them who were superb teams. Holland in the 1970s, total football, never won the World Cup, 2 finals. The great Brazil team in '82, one of the best Brazil teams there's ever been, lost the World Cup, never won the World Cup. Even the great Hungarian teams in the 50s who redefined how we look at football tactically, and certainly gave England a few lessons, never won the World Cup. There's examples in club football as well, I'm sure. Are they going to fall into that category? It'd be a terrible shame, actually, if they do. It's it's a bit like, from a British perspective, Andy Murray in tennis, right? Brilliant player, the best player we've ever produced. Yeah. Has the misfortune of playing in the same era as Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. So he's won 3 slams, and in another era, he would have, wiped the floor. He would have dominated, surely, with his ability. I kind of draw parallels between those two, really. So, yes, if Liverpool come back next season, challenge for the Premier League and win the Champions League, then we may be having a different discussion. At the moment, it's potential unfulfilled, I'm afraid.
And it's only going to get more difficult. Haaland is coming into the Man City side, so Erling Haaland is going to be the number 9 that they haven't had since Aguero left. So the Man City team that I still think was the best club football team in the world this year, even though they just barely won the Premier League and did not win the Champions League. I still think, for my money, that they were the best team in the world, and they're going to get better. Liverpool may be losing Sadio Mane. From all accounts, he's on his way out the door. So if they lose Mane, haven't heard about anybody else that might be coming in to replace him as of yet. How are they going to keep pace? They're obviously going to be a threat in the Champions League. They'll be a threat in the Premier League, but it seems like they're losing ground, not gaining ground the way that Man City even is.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, what's the one thing you'd say about that Man City title-winning team they don't have? A centre-forward. It's like, now they're going to have one of the world's best centre-forwards. It's ominous. It's really ominous. They have the potential to once again, if Haaland fires in the Premier League, to win the title by 20 points, as they have done in certain recent seasons. It's constant evolution at Man City with Guardiola. He doesn't stand still. They pulled off a real coup here and done it very, very quickly at the start of the summer to get Haaland in the door. And they've got him for 51 million as well, which is much less than everyone expected. A year ago, we were talking like 120 million for him. Pounds, this is. But, it's sort of, great bit of business. They'll probably strengthen in midfield as well. I know they've been linked with Kelvin Phillips at Leeds, who's an England international. So, that's probably, they're going to lose a couple of guys in the midfield. If they replace them correctly, then, they're going to be even stronger next season. Of course they are. It could be Guardiola's last season. He said he'll leave in 2023. We don't know what, he'll do next. But he doesn't hang around forever at places. He may want to take a bit of time out of the game and then consider what to do with his next step. He's always said it could be his last season, so therefore last chance to win that Champions League that has eluded him. They've come to dominate the Premier League, as I said, 4 out of the last 5 years. They win all the domestic cups, or they have done, not this season, but in previous years. So, yeah, and they're getting stronger. And Liverpool are either going to have to catch up, and they're not ones for spending 100 million on a player. They're going to have to spend less, but spend it really well. As you say, it looks like Sadio Mane might be on his way to Bayern Munich, although I don't think he's actually told the club officially that he wants to leave. But at 35 million, he's a bargain, really. He's only got 1 year left on his contract.
Right.
So Liverpool should cash in. He's a big asset. He's a great player. It's their last chance to get any money for him, and Salah for that matter, although I can't see them both leaving in one summer. But yeah, you rebuild. Klopp has signed a new contract. He'll want to create another great team that's capable of challenging for trophies. But yeah, they're going to need to find a new forward. I think until Tottenham qualified for the Champions League, Son Heung-min was one option, but I think that's cooled down a bit. They've got Fabio Carvalho coming in from Fulham, but he's obviously a bit young. You can't expect him to fire straight away in the Premier League. So yeah, they're going to have to go into the market to keep up with City, and you wonder how much money there will actually be for him to spend. And equally, who's available now? Is there a great selection of top class strikers out there? I doubt that this summer.
As far as our American audience, and speaking of player movement, does Christian Pulisic stay with Chelsea next year, or does he move on?
Yeah, there's talk of him moving on. I wouldn't be surprised. He's been a decent player for Chelsea. He has his moments. He's certainly had his moments, but I don't think anyone's saying that he's like the first name on the team sheet at Chelsea. The good news for them is the takeover's finally been sorted out. It's actually official as of today. So the uncertainty around their summer in the transfer market has lifted a little bit, but that means that could be bad news for Pulisic, because it means they can go out and buy players now. They may buy a replacement for him. He may be kind of pushed down the pecking order, and he may decide that now is the time to move. I'm afraid I don't know who he's kind of been linked to, but he's had a couple of decent years there. Maybe not fired in the way Chelsea and him may have wanted, but I think it depends who they bring in, to be honest. They've got a wealth of attacking options. They've got some great wide players. They've got Lukaku, who obviously hasn't really performed as a £98 million striker, hoped for. He's caused some trouble at times from some of his comments. Still got Timo Werner up front as well. They've got plenty of options. I think something's got to give. Some of those guys are probably going to be shifted out this summer, at least two, you would think. And then if the new owners give them some money to spend, then new players will be coming in. So had this takeover dragged out a little bit and the sanctions still on Chelsea, they probably would have tried to keep everyone, because they couldn't have gone into the market to sign replacements. But now there will be some money available for Thomas Tuchel to buy some new players. It may be a kind of sign to Pulisic that it may be time to get out and get some more regular football.
And especially with the World Cup coming up, I know that Christian is obviously a first name on the team sheet and will be a starter no matter what for the U.S. at the World Cup. But you'll want to be playing regularly, too. You want to be in good form for your national team, given the fact that the World Cup is in the fall. And so you have to hit the ground running for your next domestic season beginning in August. So that's obviously a priority for a lot of players. As we get set to close this out, I mentioned earlier that I would get to the chaos that happened outside of the Stade de France during the course of the Champions League final this weekend. How does that happen? I know a lot of people said that, they had short notice because of the war in Ukraine. They had to move the final from St. Petersburg, Russia to Paris. But that explanation doesn't cut it, because even then, they've still had plenty of time to organize this. And the security, the chaos, the pepper spray, the way they treated some of the fans, how does something like that get so out of hand and happen in what should be such an organized event?
Yeah, great question. And UEFA need to answer it very, very honestly and have some reflection on it, because it was an absolute shambles. Yeah, it's not like they moved the final from St. Petersburg to a city and a country that's never hosted a big event before. This is the Stade de France. It hosted the '98 World Cup final. It hosted the 2016 Euro final. It hosts internationals in both rugby, football, all manner of events there. They should be used to dealing with big crowds. So the French authorities seem to be blaming a lot of Liverpool fans who apparently had fake tickets. This is their line. That's what they're blaming. Today, the French sports minister came out and said that 70% of people who tried to get in had a fake ticket. Now, to me, that sounds pretty ridiculous. I mean, I'm not saying, there obviously there must have been some counterfeit tickets in operation, in sort of circulation. You get that at quite a lot of big events, unfortunately. And they were claiming that the bottlenecks were a result of people going up to the turnstiles, trying to scan these fraudulent tickets. And obviously they got turned away. They had to be kind of dealt with. And the gates were closed in the meantime to stop people pushing through. That obviously delayed people who genuinely did have tickets behind them. But from all accounts that I've read, the police didn't help matters by blocking off wide thoroughfares, by parking police vans in the way. So fans had to funnel through ridiculously tight spaces. When people got agitated, and from all accounts, the Liverpool fans were incredibly patient and they did turn up on time. It's not like they all rushed there 5 minutes before kickoff. There were people queuing 2 or 3 hours before the game, and they still didn't get in on time. And unfortunately, the reaction, and we see it quite a lot of the French police, is just to kind of fire the tear gas and worry about it later. And a lot of accounts of Liverpool fans being in sort of a near crush condition, I guess, shoulder to shoulder with people. Accounts of gangs of thieves trying to pickpocket them, rob them of phones and wallets, and while they were stood there unable to move. And people, locals, trying to storm the gates, climbing over the gates to try and get into the stadium. I mean, as someone who was there last summer at Wembley, it's not like it's a problem unique to France or anywhere else. England, it was shambolic last summer. It was awful. It was a real hostile atmosphere. Myself, I'm an England fan, but I'm like 6'4". I have sharp elbows, and even I had to fight my way into the stadium that night. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, again, a UEFA event. So why did they not sit down and figure out a better security plan? Why were there not ticket checks further away from the ground to try and weed out these people with fake tickets? Why was the police blocking access routes? Why were fans sent on detours all the way around the stadium to the Real Madrid end, which just caused more problems because they just came across a mass of fans of the other team? These are serious questions. I think the French authorities are trying to absolve themselves of blame totally, pin the blame on the Liverpool fans who were there in, it's obviously huge numbers, but anyone who was there, and you can see the TV footage online and social media footage, actually the Liverpool fans behaved themselves. They were patient, they queued up, and were just treated abhorrently, really, by the police and the authorities. And yeah, serious questions need to be asked and lessons learned, because is this going to happen at every major UEFA final now? There were problems at the Europa League final as well, problems at the Euro final last year. I mean, it's really going to put people off, especially families, going to football games.
Well, in any event, here we are at the end of May. The Champions League is now over. The domestic seasons are over. I would say it's a time to exhale and maybe everybody go on holiday, but then you look at the calendar and, the Nations League games are coming up. Then here in the U.S., we also have some friendlies, and it never ends. The football calendar just never stops producing football. So there's always something, always a game, training. The summer tours are going to come back. Chelsea, Arsenal, some of the big European clubs are coming over here this summer as well. So we just keep going. We just keep churning out the football, don't we?
Yeah, we do. That's what my wife says. When does the football end? And I have to honestly say, it never does end. We don't even really have a tournament this summer. But as you say, we've got the Nations League, which is an income. I think it's a great tournament personally, but a lot of people see it as an inconvenience. Literally today,
Yeah.
De Bruyne came out and said, "I don't basically consider it a nothing tournament. I don't really want to play in it." They've squeezed in 4 international games for each country in the next month. There's then players.
It's too much. It's just too much.
Overkill.
You look at the calendar, and I mean, yeah, and then you look at the Champions League final, and we talked about it earlier, how Liverpool seemed to just be getting to the finish line. They were fatigued. They were tired. They've been chasing so many trophies, and that's what happens. And you don't want your best players and best teams to be less than their best for the biggest games, and that's the kind of situation you force when you have all of these games throughout the year. I know it's the conversation for another time, but I don't know if there's a good solution because there's too much money to be made. There's too many organizations that want to get their football games on the calendar. So it seems like this is just going to continue to happen year after year. So, just get ready for a full diet of football no matter where you are or when you are.
Yeah, it's great if you're a fan, but less good if you're a player or a manager. I mean, next season will be absolutely the worst ever. You've got the World Cup that will occupy a full block of a month in the middle of the season. So every domestic season will have to start that little bit earlier, finish that little bit later. You've got to cram in the whole Champions League group stage before the end of November because all the players pretty much that play in the Champions League will be off to Qatar. You'll come back and then you'll find that you've got to fit in 25 rounds of the Premier League season still. So they'll be playing every midweek. We've got 2 domestic cup competitions in England to fit in, as well as the knockout stages of the Champions League, Europa League, whatever. Plus international games, a whole set of qualifiers for the next European Championship. So, it literally will not stop between the end of July, or actually the start of July with those pre-season tours, and probably June the following year. So, good luck to them.
There are guys that are going to be on the pitch gasping for air come Boxing Day. They're going to finish their Boxing Day games and say, we can't do it anymore. But
it's ridiculous. I mean, the Christmas schedule in England is intense as it is. They play every 2 or 3 days. You hear all the top managers complaining about it, especially those who've come over from European leagues where they traditionally don't play at Christmas and they have a bit of a break. But even in those leagues, even in Germany, I think they're probably not even going to get a winter break because of the World Cup. I mean, they've got to fit those fixtures in somehow. And the big clubs are playing in European competitions, taking up loads of midweek spaces. And then obviously to add it in a couple of years, we've got the delight of an expanded Champions League group stage, which will go on for even longer. So that's even more games. You've got FIFA talking about holding their own pre-season tournament, like the Club World Cup, expanding that, playing it in the summer in China or somewhere, with all teams from around the world, the champions of each confederation. I mean, it will just never stop. If you're a footballer, you come to May, you get to the Champions League final, and then you realise you've played 70 games, and I remember thinking at the end of the FA Cup final when they were stepping up to take penalties. It's how are you even standing up? These guys, these are the fittest athletes in the world. It's how can you move? How are your muscles still functioning? Something will have to give. Something will have to be cut from the calendar at some point. Something will have to just give, or some competition somewhere will just be devalued by putting out reserve teams or whatever. These guys, they're only human.
Well, what's really going to struggle are the beaches and the nightclubs in Ibiza, because there's going to be nobody there to go. All of the star football players who would typically cram those places are going to be busy playing football. So Ibiza is going to struggle the most.
Yeah, exactly. They just come out of 2 years of COVID, and now none of the big spenders are going to go this summer because they're all playing in the Nations League, which they all love, and then they'll be going off to the US or Australia on a pre-season tour. So yeah, maybe just the 1 week in the nightclubs this year, and then back to the training ground.